Welcome back to That's Life with John Carver. Today I'm titling this episode A Really Bad Trade. A really bad trade. Have you ever done something that you wished you would not have done before? That's the big picture of what I want to share with you today. And just in a minute or two, I want to share an ancient tale that illustrates that point perfectly. But first I want to share some quotes from smarter people than me, for sure. A guy named Dalen Oaks writes, "Desires dictate our priorities, priorities shape our choices, and choices determine our actions." The older I get, I have to tell you that the more I'm paying attention to the fact that more and more people base their decisions or make choices based on emotion instead of based on logic. I wonder how many times you have made a decision that you regretted because of emotion. You didn't think things through. I am guilty of doing that more than one time. I'll just leave it right there. I wonder how many times you have made some choices that you wished you would have been able to take back because those choices were not thought out even a little bit, let alone completely. Now, the manipulation of people's emotions is an epidemic. I can remember more than a few times that I'll be sitting at home, got done work, trying to unwind from my day, and turned on the TV, and a Burger King commercial comes on. And I look at this juicy double cheeseburger, or this Whopper, on this Burger King commercial, and this is like 9:30 at night. It's only happened a few times. But I told my wife, I said, I need to go get a cheeseburger. She looked at me like I had four heads. She goes, what? I said, yeah, I have to go get a cheeseburger. So I'll drive 5 or 6, 7 miles down to the local Burger King and get food at night, now 10 o'clock at night, that I know I shouldn't be eating because I allowed the manipulation of this TV commercial to, let's just say, whet my appetite. Wonder how many times you have done something similar whereby you allowed emotion to manipulate you to do some things that you know you should not have done. Let me share this ancient tale. Now, I wasn't there at the time. I'm not that old. But there's an ancient story that I want to share with you. One day, now mind you, this story was supposedly happened a couple 4,000 years ago or so. So the story reads this way in this ancient text. It says, one day when Jacob was cooking some stew, again, a few thousand years ago, Esau, his brother, arrived home from the wilderness exhausted and hungry. Now Esau, again, was the brother of Jacob, and Jacob kind of liked hanging around the house and liked to cook, and Esau was more the hunter type, liked to be out and about. So Esau, the hunter, said to Jacob, I'm starved, give me some of that red stew. All right, Jacob said, but trade me your rights as the firstborn son. So let me kind of back up a little bit. In that context, in that story, in that environment, the oldest son, which in this story was Esau, would get the bulk of the inheritance from the father of these two guys. And at the time, according to the story, the father was really, really old. So in the next sentence, Esau said, look, I'm starving. You know, what good is my inheritance to me if I'm going to starve to death? So Jacob had this epiphany that he could manipulate his brother out of his inheritance because Esau thought he was starving to death and wanted some of what Jacob was cooking. So the story continues. Then Jacob said to Esau, you know, I'll give you some bread and stew, but first you have to trade me this pot of stew for your share of the inheritance. So the longer story of it is that's exactly what happened. Esau, because he believed that he was going to starve to death, he didn't even think of the long-term value of his father's wealth. So I wonder if you have maybe not had the same situation, obviously, but maybe a false sense of urgency creates really a climate for making stupid choices. Again, a false sense of urgency. Advertisers do this all the time. If you don't get to this particular furniture store in the next 36 hours, you're going to miss out on this wonderful sale. Or it's the end of the month and these car sales we're at the end of the year and we don't have a whole lot of cars left. So if you want to get the car, you need to get down here tonight and get this car to get this great deal. A false sense of urgency to make you do something that maybe you really have no interest in doing it in the first place. Because people understand, people in certain industries understand that if they threaten to take something away, human nature, more times than not, wants to have what somebody's trying to take away. So they use that to their benefit. Herb Stevenson wrote one time, over the last 2 decades, one approach to overcome complacency has been to create a false sense of urgency. It's driven by pressures to perform that actually create fear and anxiety and anger. Because it is a false sense of urgency often created through veiled threats. Think about that story I shared moments ago about Jacob and Esau. Now, Esau was in this belief mindset that he was going to starve to death because probably, if this story's actually happened and true, that he didn't plan accordingly. He didn't pack enough food for this trip out to go hunting. So in the ancient story, his belief, Esau's belief, caused him to make some seriously stupid mistakes. I would suggest to you that you and I have made some serious mistakes over the years because we didn't think things through. I can tell you some stories that I've fallen on my face more times than I care to share all of them here because I've allowed my emotion of the moment to cloud my logic at the moment. I've made more mistakes and more wrong choices because I allowed the emotion of what I wanted at the time to cloud what was the right thing to do or the healthy thing to do or the right path to take at that given moment. So the emotion really of fear blocks common sense many times. There's been so many times that I've allowed fear to get in my way of attempting certain things in my life, and those really great opportunities then pass me by because I've allowed the anxiety and the fear of me being embarrassed by falling on my face and looking foolish in some people's eyes to run past me instead of embracing it whether I was looking foolish or not. Fear really pushes people to make choices without all the information. And another way to say it is they see a piece of the information and then base their entire story on the piece of the information and then allow other people to manipulate that little piece of information into something that is false. And then people believe the falsehood and go down that path that leads to some pretty difficult situations. So Jacob in this ancient tale saw an opportunity that was not ethical. He saw an opportunity to manipulate his brother to get something that obviously he had his eye on in the first place. He wanted the share of the inheritance that belonged to Esau. I would suggest to you that there are some people in your world, that there are some people in your life that want what you have. You're saying, well, John, I don't have a whole lot. I don't have, lots of cars, lots of lands, and $10 million in the bank. I don't have that. But believe you me, that there are people in your world that want some or all of what you have. So it's very important for you to get the full picture of what and who is around you every single day. Chris Jammy wrote one time, just because something isn't a lie doesn't mean that it isn't deceptive. A liar knows that he's a liar, but one who speaks mere portions of truth in order to deceive is a craftsman of destruction. A craftsman of destruction. Have you ever been in conversations where you've caught somebody in pieces of truths and pieces of lies, but they don't really realize that you understand the whole story and you're listening and you're nodding and you're deep into this conversation, but you know way down deep that that person's full of stuff. They're telling you half stories. Half stories is the same thing as a lie, by the way. A half truth is a whole lie, right? Again, a half truth is a whole lie. You got to be very, very careful who you surround yourself with consistently. Again, your emotions, my emotions, will push us into making bad trades that you'll regret for a lifetime. Let me share a difficult story. Way back in April of 1988, my wife and I got married, and we realized pretty quickly that renting an apartment was not the best financial move for us. So by the end of 1988, we bought our first house. We were less than 6 or 7 months married, and we bought our first house. Well, we're moving into this house, this row home, this townhouse in South Baltimore, Maryland. And at that time, I had well over 10,000 baseball cards that I had saved as a kid. And I came from a relatively safe neighborhood, and I didn't realize at the time that the neighborhood I was moving into wasn't so safe. But you know what? I'm sure people are people. Certainly nobody's going to bother my baseball cards. So I put them in the shed in the backyard that was enclosed in a high 6-foot fence. And I didn't really think anybody would mess with them until I got a lock for the shed. Yeah, dumb. I put them in the shed without a lock on the shed. So a day or two goes by, and I went back out the backyard to bring the baseball cards back into the house, put them on some shelves and things. And the shed door was ajar. And a considerable sum of my baseball cards were stolen. I walked out to the alley behind the house, and I saw baseball cards going up the alley behind the house. Stupid decision not to put a lock on the shed, because I just didn't think anybody would be interested in going into the shed and much interested in baseball cards. My goodness. Sometimes you and I make decisions that are based on emotion that obviously now 30 years later, almost 31 years later, actually over 31 years later, I regret. I feel stupid. There were some seriously good baseball cards in there that if I would have had them today, would be worth way more money than they were back then. So the point is that sometimes we make bad decisions because maybe the information we had at the time wasn't correct, or, I hate to tell you this on the show, that I was too lazy to go get a lock to lock the shed so that my baseball cards would probably be protected from potential burglars. Yeah, I said that. Laziness sometimes gets in your way and my way from doing what we need to do. Let me go back to that story about Esau. What if Esau, maybe, I'm just guessing here, maybe he didn't feel like packing enough food for his hunting trip. Maybe he just, I'm not going to be gone that long. Maybe he didn't prepare. Maybe he didn't have enough forethought to prepare for this trip, which then opened up an opportunity for somebody else, even his own brother, to manipulate him. I heard a quote that my piano teacher told me a long time ago. She said, "Proper planning prevents poor performance. Proper planning prevents poor performance." And my piano teacher, I was, I don't remember, 11, 12 years old when she was trying to teach me piano. Her name's Phyllis Davis to be exact. And I was really giving her a hard time because I didn't want to change the way I was playing the piano because I mastered it a certain way and it was okay. But she wanted to help me tweak that skill set a bit more. She says, "John, if you do this, if you change just this a little bit, you're going to be able to play so much better, much more fluid, and it's going to sound really, really good." But I bucked it, man. I didn't want to do it because you know what? It was beyond my comfort zone at the time. I was lazy. I don't even need to put quotes around it. I was lazy. That's a fact. Sometimes you have chosen not to do certain things, hate to tell you this, but because you have been lazy. So then your laziness gets in the way of you achieving certain things, And then it opens the door, it opens the shed door, if you will, for somebody to take really what belongs to you because you have chosen not to do the hard work on the front end. You've chosen not to go buy the lock for the shed. You've chosen not to pack enough food for your hunting trip. You've chosen to allow a belief system that you're going to starve to death and be manipulated by your own brother. I'm telling you, emotions can literally destroy your life in ways that you cannot imagine. Harriet Breaker wrote one time, if you're an approval addict, your behavior is as easy to control as that of any other junkie. All a manipulator needs to do is a simple two-step process. Listen to this. Give you what you crave and then threaten to take it away. Again, give you what you crave and then threaten to take it away. Every drug dealer in the world plays this game. So the story of Esau and Jacob goes on even deeper, and it's a very long story, but I'll try to shorten it for this episode. The story goes beyond what I just shared with you about the bowl of soup and Esau believing he was going to starve to death. So there came a time when the father, the old gentleman, the father of Esau and Jacob, wanted to give them his blessing, to make it official that Esau was going to be the recipient of the majority of the inheritance. So it's like, so Jacob was like, oh my goodness, I got to do something about this quick. So listen to this story. This is just part of the tale. Jacob's mother gets involved because Esau's mom was not the same mom. So Jacob's mother gets involved and says, look, Esau's really hairy and rough and you're kind of smooth skinned. Why don't you go, put an outfit on that will mask who you really are so that your dad will think it's you. Because his dad was going blind and he couldn't see very well. In fact, he couldn't see hardly at all, the story says. So when dad calls you to go to kind of give you the rights to the inheritance, he's going to think that you're going to think that you're Esau, and then you'll get more than what Esau is going to get. It's a longer story than that, but that's the gist of it. So Jacob follows his mom's advice, who's also a deceiver, who's also a liar, obviously, in this story. So he goes and wears this makeup to make himself look like Esau. So again, dad's really blind or practically blind. Longer story short, Jacob ends up getting the majority of the inheritance because of deception, because of a lie. I'm telling you right now, the people that surround you can either take you places or they can literally cripple you in ways that you cannot even imagine. The older I get, I'm even more fanatical, and I use that word intentionally, fanatical about who I allow in my circle. Even some of my closest relatives, I've had to set aside and say, you know what? Because you have chosen to go down a road that is unethical, sometimes illegal, sometimes dangerous, I can't afford to be in that zone. Because then I'm going to get, like I'm sharing in this text, in this story, my emotions are going to get so out of control that I could potentially make some very wrong choices because I'm in that circle. If you really want to achieve some really good stuff in your life, you've got to choose very carefully the people that you want in your circle. And sometimes when you have to excuse people from your circle, you will hurt people's feelings. That's the rule of life. Every successful person that you'll ever read about, see on TV, or see in movies or whatever, anybody that's been truly successful is absolutely fanatical about who they allow in their circle because they know that clock is ticking faster every single day. They know that if they're not careful about who they allow in their circle, then they're not going to get anywhere on purpose. They're going to regress backwards consistently. Jacob had really, in this story, if this story is true, no honor and no integrity. He had no honor and no integrity because then he manipulated the emotions of his own brother. Think about that. He manipulated the emotions of his own brother. That's no different than some crooked salespeople. I had a situation in my family recently, as of this taping, that there was a salesperson that manipulated one of my relatives in a way that was just mind-blowing. So I got on Facebook and I says, has anybody had dealings with this particular group, this particular organization? And man, it lit up the entire page, because 95% of the people who responded is like, oh no, she went there and she got this, and they're flim-flammers and this and that. But that individual, that business, has a reputation of manipulating the emotions of other people in order to sell their product. Stories have a really powerful tool throughout history to change people's mindsets and give them feelings that maybe they would not have had. A horrible example of this is Adolf Hitler. He created a lie and told that lie over and over again until people started believing the lie. And then that resulted, over a relatively short period of time, of millions and millions of people being murdered, because he decided to frame a story in a coat, if you will, of emotion, and repeated that over and over again until millions of people were killed. A scarcity mentality believes that there's not enough for everybody to go around. There are people in your life, I'm telling you, there's people in your life, there have been people in my life that use that scarcity mindset that there's not enough to go around, when in fact there is more than enough to go around. John Maxwell relates a story of a guy named Bobby Jones, a legendary golfer who won a major tournament at age 21. By age 28, he had already won the Grand Slam and retired, the story says. Jones had an uncle who said that by that time he was 14, Bobby was probably already the best golfer in the world. He certainly was popular. However, Jones was also known for his temper, because he would throw his clubs when he got irritated. Jones' uncle sat down with him and said, Bobby, your problem is you've mastered the game of golf, but listen, you haven't mastered your emotions. Until, John Maxwell says, you master your emotions, you'll never be a champion in golf. John Maxwell observes, he says, we have choices when it comes to our emotions. We can master them, or they can master us. Look, I'm still working on that too, just like probably you, that emotions can either rule you or you can rule them. You see, Esau's potential lack of planning caused his emotions to be totally discombobulated, if that's a word, totally taken out of context as a result of his lack, his potential laziness, his lack of forethought. It opened doors for other people to play mind games with him. Your out of control emotions can literally blind you to seeing the motive behind other people. I've had a tendency to do that, to be very transparent. I've had the tendency in my past, to allow my emotions to dictate my logic instead of my logic dictating my emotions. Think about that. Have you allowed your emotions to dictate your logic instead of your logic to dictate your emotions? I'm asking you today to not be like Jacob or Esau. I'm asking you to do what needs to be done consistently, to hang around people that are much smarter than you, because they will enable you to see through the people in your life whereby they have a good motive to serve you, to help you, or to manipulate you and take you down a path that is not healthy at all. And Bondi Sanders wrote, when you react, you let other people control you. Again, when you react, you let other people control you. Listen, when you respond, you're in control. When you respond, you're in control. There's times when I believe that it is smarter for you to keep your mouth shut in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of a situation, because if you open your mouth at the wrong time, you're going to say things that you're going to regret. Been there, done that. I think you have been too. So as I wind up this episode today, if you really want to avoid making a bad trade, think logically, think long-term, don't think short-term. Don't allow your emotions to drive your decisions, because when you do, I can almost guarantee you that every situation you'll end up with a bad trade and with regretting things that you really wish you wouldn't have done in the first place. My name is John Carver. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back real soon.